from now on, anytime it happens, especially with this annual charity that we do, it's always going to raise questions. And that's so frustrating for me personally. Yeah, we've already gotten that. We've already gotten people who said that the money that we've managed to raise through our channel, through our very gracious, generous audience, wasn't being passed along to these kids that we were, showing as being the beneficiaries. And that really gross, really ugly things that were absolutely infuriating, if I'm being totally honest. Hey there guys, welcome back to New World Old Soul. Thank you so much for being here. On today's episode, Melissa and I are going to be discussing some of the more recent hot button issues, I guess you could say. Not political by any means. In fact, one of the things I have to show you here in a moment is pretty funny, a little disturbing, I guess is how I would personally categorize it. It ties into a bigger discussion about IVF. We're going to touch upon that real quick. And then also the Kill Creator movement, which is happening now online here, specifically on YouTube. We're going to speak on that very briefly as well. But how are you, beautiful lady? I love seeing you sitting across the table from me. You look gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
You are very welcome. So can I show you this video that I found this morning very quickly?
Yeah, you always come up with the weirdest stuff to show me in the morning. What do you got?
And hey, before we jump into this, we would also ask that you please consider subscribing. We are making some headway, some progress with our subscriber percentage for those of you who watch on a regular basis. If you do enjoy what it is that we're doing here on New World Old Soul, our podcast channel, subscribe, like, comment. We appreciate it. Can I show you this slice of bologna that is about to smile at you here, Mama?
Is this story full of bologna or is this real?
So little additional information before we jump in here. So these are Japanese scientists at the University of Tokyo, I believe, who are coming up with some lab-grown human skin. And the plan is to develop this and actually place it on robots.
Why?
That's a great question.
I mean, I can see developing human skin for burn victims. How do they make the human skin? Do we know?
I'm not entirely sure, but you can already see the first frame of this video. How disturbing is this thing?
I mean, it's kind of cute.
It's kind of, it reminds me of a slice of bologna.
What are the eyeballs made out of?
It's wet bologna. Also a good question.
They look like martini olives.
All right, let's jump into this because I thought it was very fascinating for one.
Does it have a nose?
A little disturbing as well. Here we go.
It's like a jelly. Oh!
This smile is part living skin tissue and part robot.
It's adorable.
It's the product of a decade of research by scientists at the University of Tokyo. It may look a little eerie.
A little?
But researchers say it could one day be used for testing cosmetics and medicine.
Is that a face?
And is an important step in the quest to make more lifelike robots. To create the smiling robot, scientists grew human cells into the shape of a face.
Why not?
The smile is produced from embedded ligament-like attachments that pull it into a wide grin.
Right before it murders you.
Shoji Takeuchi.
Until now, no one had figured out how to make the living skin move. So I think by attaching these actuators and anchors, it became possible to manipulate living skin for the first time. This is a new technology that we developed.
Takeuchi says living tissue has a number of advantages over metal and plastic, such as skin's ability to repair itself. The hope is to add more features to the lab-grown skin, including a circulatory system and nerves.
What?
Takeuchi says the work could potentially lead to
That's a
safer
finger.
testing for cosmetics and drugs.
At least I hope it's a finger, I think.
To cover robots one day. One problem he still faces is the so-called uncanny valley. That's the unsettling feeling that comes when robots start to resemble humans a little too closely.
Yeah, why?
Takeuchi says he hopes to overcome it.
Various things have been talked about to reduce the creepiness.
Let's do better.
I think one of the important matters is the materials. I think that making robots out of the exact same materials as humans and having them show the same expressions might be one key to overcoming the uncanny valley.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there. So we get the point. Tell me that's not, again, fascinating, a little funny, but just creepy. And why?
If they're going for not creepy, they have failed. That is the creepiest thing I've seen.
So I read the article attached to that video, and they are hoping to get robots to the point that they can utilize this skin, this layer of skin, which is capable of self-repair. So it would be like a human in the sense that it would overcome injuries. And also they want to be able to apply a sense of touch or feel so that it has the sensation and can react accordingly.
Oh, great. So when you go to try to have to shut them off, they're going to be like, no.
They can fight back.
Yeah, we all grew up in the 80s and 90s and we saw Terminator. That was a terrifying movie. Like
The fence.
Everyone knows that scene. That scene gave me nightmares.
Yeah,
and
me
then
too.
Just like a skeleton. Horrifying. The robots did that. Only in the movie, they were aliens, right?
Yeah.
Why are we creating the Terminator sequel?
They have their own explanations as to why it is that they're trying to develop this, but I don't understand the concept of trying to make robots more human. Like, we already have human beings. How about we devote some time, money, and resources to bettering our experience here on Earth instead of trying to create beings that will resemble us that leads to our eventual demise. That's just me being crazy.
I mean, yeah, we have burn units in hospitals. We have veterans that could use this human skin. Why are we not... If you must grow human skin, if this is something that you're passionate about for your career, why not put all of the dollars and all of the research into making it move and creating a nervous system for human beings that could use it instead of robots?
I think that's a part of their plan. We came up with the name of this podcast. We said it was going to be New World, Old Soul. And this is a prime example of
the new world part of it.
It's the new world. It's like, what is real life anymore? I've said this before, but when I see things like that on the internet, I just kind of shake my head. Like, what is this reality now? Is this what we're all doing and just clearly accepting as being normal?
He's very passionate about it. And he's not the only one. There's a lot of people that are very passionate about it. I mean, when you hear Elon Musk talking about AI and robots and everything, and the frankness of his nature when he's talking about it, he's just like, yeah. And then someone's like, oh, I guess don't kick a robot. He's like, yeah, don't do that.
Shouldn't do that.
He says it so like it's a bad idea.
So we're starting out with this video because, again, it is mildly hilarious.
The little smiley guy was cute, but then it just went downhill from there.
I briefly showed you a clip of this morning because that's when I found it. And this led to a discussion that we were having since everything kind of tied in about IVF, in vitro fertilization. This is a conversation that we had previously because a subscriber actually brought it to our attention in a comment asking our thoughts and opinions on IVF. I will withhold at least a portion of my own personal opinion when it comes to this matter because I'm a dude. And I'm sure I will be...
Well, IVF affects men in the same way that it affects women.
This all ties in. This has become a recent hot button political issue because it ties in, I guess, indirectly to the abortion debate. And God forbid I as a man say anything bad about that.
Yeah, I feel like IVF's different though, because infertility as a couple it's not always couples going, and a lot of times it's same-sex couples that are utilizing IVF.
Sure.
Or relying on, because IVF... Gosh, there's so many different avenues for it. It's very common for same-sex male couples to, like a homosexual couple, to use IVF and then a surrogate.
The morality debate surrounding it, however, revolves primarily around the discarding of potential human life.
Yeah. So when I forgot what we were discussing, but we had one subscriber very angry with us that said, do you know what is in Project 2025? They are going to outlaw IVF.
It's being inserted into the current day political debate, and it is being very closely associated with the Republican Party, conservatives, for whatever reason.
And just the end of a lot of freedoms.
We live in an age of media manipulation. This is definitely a part of that equation.
Yeah. So I'm not an expert on the Heritage Foundation or anything like that. That's not what this is about. It was about one specific question saying, how do you feel about them outlawing IVF? I have never personally thought anything was wrong with IVF.
Yeah.
If infertility is not something that we have dealt with, I mean, you can literally just sneeze by me and it has been...
No, we're very blessed in that regard, and I don't want to make light of the people that do have fertility issues because it is a very, it's an unfortunate circumstance that a lot of people are forced to deal with when desiring to start a family, to have children. Yeah,
the desire to be a mother or a father or to raise a child together is very powerful, and to not be able to do that would be extremely, extremely devastating.
Absolutely.
And so that's just, so I've never really thought anything of IVF. If that's what you needed, by all means, go ahead. But then I started digging into it this week because I was asked the question and I wanted to try to educate myself more on the issue. So I actually came across it's weird. I think my phone was just listening to me because we were talking about the question. And then all of a sudden I got this video recommendation. It was Allie Beth Stuckey talking to Granger Smith. So Granger Smith is a country singer turned pastor. He left his country singing career. He had a child after the loss of their son, River, who very unfortunately passed away at an early age in the family's pool. After that, they were struggling, and he tells the story much better than I could ever retell it. So they were struggling, and they decided that they wanted to bring another child into their family. Well, his wife, Amber, had already had her tubes tied. And this was before they had lost River. So they had made that permanent decision not to have any more children. And the easiest and best option for them, not that it's easy, because I know IVF is not easy, was to go the IVF route. So they decided to do that, and they did conceive their son Maverick through IVF, and he's beautiful, and they're very blessed to have him. But they learned a lot through that process, and Granger said that knowing what he knows now, he would not recommend it to people.
For what reason?
Did
you watch the entire episode?
I watched the entire episode, yeah. And then I also dove a little deeper down Allie's channel, and she actually had an IVF doctor on that had since retired and has now devoted her life towards finding holistic methods for women to conceive, if it's at all possible, because of
the moral and ethical issues associated with it.
She said she felt that her soul was on the line.
Wow.
Yeah, so she left IVF after many, many years of being an IVF doctor. And so the issue is the embryos. So like, let's say you're over 40.
Guilty.
They're saying, I know. So let's say for us, and we decided that we wanted to go do IVF.
Sure.
They would recommend that we have up to 12 embryos in order to make that successful, because my old womb is not going to be like under 35 is ideal. Yeah. Well, I'm 6 years past that. So they would recommend that we have 12 embryos.
It's a numbers game.
It's a numbers game. So then they take the embryos and they will genetically test them. You don't have to do genetic testing at some of the clinics, but other clinics require you to do genetic testing. Otherwise, they won't do your IVF treatments.
Do you know what the reasoning for that is?
It's chromosomal testing.
Okay.
So they will look at, so in Granger's case, you'd have to go watch the podcast to get the numbers. I forgot how many embryos they had. They did chromosomal testing, and they said these two are both males, but these are your two strongest embryos.
Okay. And again, we're not experts on this matter, but I wonder if there's a higher number of abnormalities with these lab fertilizations.
There are higher levels of
abnormalities
with live-born IVF children.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Autism, stillbirth, premature birth.
So they're screening for all of that ahead of time.
That's
as much as they
No,
can.
that's just the process of IVF actually leads to like 4 times the rate of stillbirth and things like that. Just having a child through IVF just greatly increases. So anyway, they take the embryos and then they test them, and they want to see if the chromosomes are all intact. So they can test to see if there's 21 chromosomes, if there's 18 chromosomes, because that would be trisomy 18, which is generally considered incompatible with life. It's a form of Down syndrome that's more severe. Trisomy 21 is generally what you see in Down syndrome kids that will live a longer, fuller life. So they will test, and then they will say, okay, these embryos aren't viable for whatever reason, or they're not the strongest.
Okay.
And then, so like in Granger's case, he had 2, both ended up being male. These are the strongest ones. The strongest one actually did not, I don't know if it didn't implant or it miscarried. It may have miscarried. And they ended up using the second one, which became their son, Maverick. So then the question came, what do you want to do with the remaining embryos? So let's say you're 40, you really wanted to have a child. They made 12 embryos, and then let's say you implanted 3, and 2 took, or something like that. What do you do with the other 9 embryos? So there's 4 choices. And this is where the moral battle comes in.
And why it's being tied into the abortion argument.
Right. So you can donate them to another couple, but the challenge with that is now your biological child, it's like adopting a child out, and you have no idea who the parents are. I mean, I would think anyone going through IVF is at least going to be a dedicated parent. That's a very difficult and expensive, costly process. But you don't know what happens to that child ultimately, or if you even have a child running around. At least if you adopt a child out, you know you have a child out there.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah, what if you donated 9 embryos and none of them took?
Right.
And then you would live your whole life wondering if you had a biological child. And I don't know how anyone could separate that thought. But maybe you don't.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't put myself in that situation. I can't imagine.
To me, that seems like the most moral
Option.
but oh, how difficult.
Okay, what are the others?
The other is to discard, which means they basically thaw it out and they get discarded as medical waste. Mm-hmm. So you're just ending the life, which then it becomes the moral question, is it a life?
At what stage of development are these embryos in?
In order to do the genetic testing, they fertilize them and then they watch them develop. I think on the 4th or 5th day, they're able to do.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to reach out to somebody that can speak on this with an expertise. I mean, we're just brushing up on this ourselves.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to discuss.
Ali Stuckey's the IVF doctor goes into full detail. Okay. She talks about the exact days and how the cells reproduce. And
we'll throw a link to that episode maybe in our description as well.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I watched it this morning. So then at like 4 or 5 days, they're able to genetically test them. And then that would be around the stage that they would implant them based on what are the most viable. So there's a case of like John and Kate +8. Everyone saw that reality show and kind of ended interestingly for them. So for her, because for the moral issue of it, she had 6 viable embryos and she said, implant them all.
Yeah.
Because I'm not throwing away any embryos. And she ended up with sextuplets. All of them took, all of them stuck. Mm-hmm. All of them are adults today. And I think that's a beautiful thing, but holy cow, they're Costco trips.
Yeah.
So, but that's a case of them all sticking. That's very, very unlikely. Mm-hmm. But there's so many twins and triplets born to IVF. So anyway, you can medically, you can thaw and discard. The other option is to keep them frozen. But this is the thing. A lot of people are like, yeah, I'm just going to keep them frozen because then I can use them another time. I can choose to donate them to a couple. I can choose to donate them to a family member. If you keep them frozen, it's expensive. And that's something that people don't know going into it. It's upwards of $1,000 a year to keep your embryos frozen. So let's say you're 40 and you're going to live to be 100 years old.
Right. Well, that's the other part of it too. Is we only, we're mere mortals. We only live for so long. So for what period of time do you decide to keep all of these eggs on ice?
Mm-hmm. So this is becoming a huge problem too, because 21% of all embryos are considered deserted. Mm. And that's because after 5 or 6 years, couples get tired of paying for it. They now have their child entering kindergarten that they conceived via IVF. They're like, we're done. This is our child. They are able to kind of mentally separate from these embryos that they've kept on ice. And it's becoming very expensive, $1,000 a year, just to make you feel better. And they just stop paying the bill. So 21% of embryos are considered abandoned. One report said that it was like 90,000 embryos in the United States. But then there were other reports coming in saying, no, it's in the millions. There are millions, at least hundreds of thousands of abandoned embryos. And now the dilemma is, who owns them?
Right.
And what do we do with them?
Yeah.
So currently, most of them are still on ice. Some have been thawed and discarded. But it's like, at what point in time do they now belong to, I don't know what it would be, the like medical
board of the state, corporation,
the government,
what are we talking about here?
Who owns these embryos?
Yeah.
And now do the parents have no rights anymore over these embryos because they didn't pay for them to be frozen still?
It's an intriguing debate. It really is. It's a tough one.
And the answer is, there is no answer.
No, it's completely subjective.
So now they're creating warehouses to store the millions of abandoned embryos.
You're describing the Matrix.
They're like in tiny little vials, and it's just embryos in warehouses. So the debate is now, which is going to become some big government debate. And I mean, I'm assuming Congress will decide eventually who owns these embryos. And I'm pretty sure they're going to say, we do.
Well, what is the other option? You brought this up to me, and it was the most creepy
Yes.
option, in my own personal opinion. What is that?
The fourth option with extra embryos is to make the decision to donate them to science.
And I say that that's creepy because you are signing off and granting permission for basically, I mean, who knows? You don't know what it is you're signing off on exactly. I mean, unless there's a set criteria and plan that's put in place. But where does the accountability come in? How do you know exactly what it is that's being done with your child?
You don't. So apparently the most popular option that parents choose, because IVF is already very expensive. They don't want to pay more. If they are done having children, there is no reason to keep them frozen. They don't want to discard them. They don't want to have them thawed and discarded. Doesn't feel right. They don't want to donate them to other couples. So they choose to donate them to science. And a lot of the embryos are used for stem cell testing and genetic testing. I guess I question, at what point are they taking the stem cells? Like, how developed are they letting the embryos get?
Right.
Are they doing it right at the 4 or 5 day? Because you can extract cells from like the center of the cell mass, and you can extract stem cells out of a small embryo. Or are they going, we don't know. Do they start to develop these children? Do they take the donated embryos and implant them into surrogate? Because there's women that agree to be surrogates for science and for testing.
Mm-hmm.
So could your child then become a science experiment and be born as a child in a ward of the state?
Again, new world that we are living in. These are the complex and very complicated issues that we are now encountering and having to deal with and having to have these discussions. It's bizarre. It's really, it makes me uncomfortable. And it's that age-old question of when exactly does life begin?
Right. When does life begin? Are these embryos life? They're compatible with life. They have the potential to be life. Are they already life?
Tough question to answer. Of course, we have our own personal thoughts and opinions. Are you, I will ask you as the female that is present here, are you comfortable with expressing your own personal opinions on this matter? Or would you rather refrain just for fear of backlash and getting roasted? That's why I'm holding back.
I won't hold back on life and on the sanctity of life. Oh my gosh,
Words
I'm
are hard.
struggling with my words today. Sanctity of life. At the embryonic stage, at the moment of conception, I firmly believe that it is a life.
Oh, okay. So when it comes to this issue of IVF, what do you think the best means of recourse is with the very obvious dilemma? Because Granger Smith on the Ali Beth Stookie podcast basically explained that having his current day knowledge of the process, that he would not do it again, correct?
He would not do it again, and that he would not recommend it to others.
Which is really interesting to hear as somebody who benefited from the process.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that like a lot of people could attack him, like, how hypocritical is that? And I don't think it's hypocritical. I think that it's knowing what I know now.
I think it's very real and very
experienced
honest.
it. Yep.
Yes, to his credit.
So
it takes a certain degree of bravery to speak honestly on a topic, especially one that is very controversial currently.
Yeah, and it's scary to say I did this and it worked favorably for me, but I don't recommend it. Like, that's a scary step to take, or position to take, I should say.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to thank this subscriber, this commenter for raising this and bringing it to our attention, because it's something that you and I hadn't really given a lot of thought about. We have this ongoing debate here in our country, in the U.S., when it comes to abortion, but that she threw the IVF element into her questioning of us, and you and I were like, why is she doing that? We didn't really connect the dots. So I appreciate her bringing that up.
I do too. I don't think that we came to the conclusion that she was hoping that we would come to. I think that we probably feel very differently on this issue.
Yeah, fair enough.
Which is fine. So she's probably like, don't thank me. And like, that's not what I wanted you to get on here and say.
These are things that you should devote some time and thought to. And yeah, it is completely subjective, I suppose, to a certain extent. But I think it's important to consider.
It's just something that I had never thought of. So infertility actually is on the rise in this country. Maybe around the world, I'm not sure. But in this country, infertility is on the rise with men and women. And
it's a whole nother conversation as to why
that
may be.
A whole nother conversation. A lot of it circles around the fact that we're putting our young girls on birth control so early for every issue. I mean, if you take your daughter to the doctor because she's having bad cramps or irregular periods or acne, they will slap them on birth control so stinking fast. We want to take a quick moment to thank Daily Wire Plus for sponsoring today's episode. We personally have been longtime members of the Daily Wire Plus, and that is because they have the best thought-provoking podcasts, groundbreaking documentaries, and really, really incredible movies. They also have some fantastic children's content. It is unfiltered, uncensored, and completely ad-free when you subscribe.
I assume that like many of you, Melissa and I had heard of the Daily Wire Plus, but we weren't initially subscribers because we didn't really have a familiarity with the content that they had available on their platform. They were releasing a documentary that the both of us really wanted to see, so we signed up. And once we were there, we were amazed by how much incredible content they had to offer.
For us, the Daily Wire is a platform that we actually relate to and that aligns with our family's core values. They have up-to-date news stories and analysis on some of the top issues facing our world and our country, all from some of the most trusted names in independent media, from Ben Shapiro to Jordan Peterson, Michael Knowles, Jeremy Boring, Matt Walsh, and my personal favorite, getting ready for the day girl, Brett Cooper.
So personally, I like to watch a lot of the movies and documentaries offered by the Daily Wire. I'm really looking forward to the upcoming release of a documentary produced by Matt Walsh called Am I Racist? Honestly, their movies and documentaries are maybe some of the best that I've ever seen.
Yeah, tickets for Am I Racist come out on the 15th, which is tomorrow actually, so make sure you grab your tickets for that. Daily Wire has something for everybody. Even our kids enjoy it because they have BentKey, which is their children's streaming platform that they started last year. I love that it teaches kids good morals. It has no agenda, and they have new episodes that come out every Saturday, which brings back the joy of the Saturday morning cartoon.
To try it out for yourself, just click on the link down below or go to getdwplus.com/GSL and subscribe and find out why it is that we choose to put our money behind where our core values are with Daily Wire Plus.
At the age of 13, 14 years old, even though they don't need birth control, it's just, different hormonal issues that your body may work out over time, or there's holistic things that you can do. I don't think something like acne is a reason to go on birth control, but yeah.
Also, there are a lot of people who are choosing not to have children, which I think is so unfortunate.
A lot of these women are building these careers. They are choosing not to get married. They are childless. Then they are entering their 40s, and all of a sudden they're not feeling fulfilled. This is a very normal and natural phenomenon. It is not made up. It is like 40 is one of the top ages for attorneys that are about to make partner or that have made partner to walk away from law firms that are females, because all of a sudden it clicks, or doctors to say, I need to have a child. Women hit 40, not all women, but a lot of women hit 40, and all of a sudden that biological clock gets real loud. I mean, I hear it. I hear that sucker going like, you sure you're done? Because it's about to end. I mean, it's just like poof. Like,
wait, one more time.
Poof. Yeah. Anyway, the biological clock is a very real thing to women, and it becomes very scary, and you start questioning everything. And I mean, you see it all the time where like people will have this gap of children, and then all of a sudden they'll have one more after, and they're like, whoa, why do you have this baby sibling over here and your youngest is 12? And it's because women's biological clocks go, you got one more year.
Yeah.
So women are turning to IVF. They're unmarried, or I mean, sometimes sperm donors, but once you're over 40, it's harder to get pregnant. So, and if you're over 45, it's really hard to get pregnant. Not for everybody, but for most people. So they'll turn to IVF. And here we are.
I guess my hope is that there will be strides and improvements made in the process that allow for us to kind of avoid this dilemma, I guess, of what to do with all of these fertilized embryos moving forward. And if worst comes to worst, hey, maybe you can just adopt yourself a robot that has human skin that resembles a human being, right?
You just have that piece of bologna on a tray and it can just smile at you.
Yeah, that'll make you happy and fulfilled.
Probably not. No. So yeah, I don't know that there is a solution. I don't think there is a moral solution as to what to do with the leftover embryos. So now a lot of women are opting to fertilize less eggs and implant all embryos. And they're refusing genetic testing. And to me, that is the only really moral way of going about IVF.
What a crazy decision to have to make, though.
Well, like, let's say that things get so weird, which it could get so weird to the point that everybody's kind of genetically engineering their children. They're already proving that they can do it.
Yeah.
So
eugenics is a thing.
It is. They can select heights, hair color, eye color. So now all of a sudden everyone's just beautiful and no one wants to conceive naturally.
And also discard and eliminate those unwanted pregnancies.
Or pregnancies that scare people.
Yeah.
Like,
it's tragic. It really is.
I want to know, has anyone had an embryo that they say this one's only got 21 chromosomes? And have any parents said implant it? Let's give it a chance.
Yeah.
Has that ever happened? Or is every embryo that may or may not have Down syndrome because genetic testing is not perfect? Are they all discarded? And that literally makes me tear up because Down syndrome people are so incredible. And with genetic testing that we have, just in pregnancies, 90% of Down syndrome children a lot of them people don't find out that they're even having Down syndrome children until they go to their gender ultrasound. We're talking 19, 20 weeks. They're finding out that their children have Down syndrome and they're saying, that's not viable with a normal life. That's not something I want to take on. This child's going to have a bad life. And they will justify terminating that life when people with Down syndrome are some of the most beautiful, incredible people in the whole world. And I know it would be scary. We know that it would be scary because when we had Kira, they did that blood test. They said, hey, we've got this new blood test available. And we didn't really know what that meant.
Right.
And how far along were we? 12 weeks, maybe?
Pretty far along.
We weren't quite at 19 weeks. I think it was like 3 or 4 months. And we said, yeah, let's do this genetic testing. Why not? So our blood test came back 1 in 100 for Down syndrome. And they told me that's really high. Yeah. Like that's really high. So we kind of lived with this fear. And then we went to her gender ultrasound. And when they did the ultrasound, they found a white spot on her heart.
Calcium deposit.
It was a calcium deposit.
Turns out we didn't know that at the time. Which
looks the same as a hole in the heart, which is consistent with trisomy 21.
And she had skeletal structure within her face because of our Asian genes on my side of the family. That also led to us having to consider whether or not that was a possibility, which for us personally was not a hang up.
No, I mean, it never at any point didn't we say we weren't going to have her.
That discussion was never going to be had.
But the fear was there.
Sure.
The fear of the unknown.
Sure, which I completely understand.
It's not the dream that you have for your child.
Yes.
When they looked at her nose, she had a lack of a outer bridge.
Yeah.
And the nurse said between the nose and the heart and the 1 in 100, like now your chances are like 1 in 10.
Yeah.
I recommend you do an amniocentesis.
Which we did not opt for.
With amnio, there's definitely a chance of miscarriage with that because you're going through the belly, through the placenta to test the amniotic fluid. So we opted not to do it. Kira does not have Down syndrome, but that fear was there.
Sure.
We didn't know. I worked in special ed as a teacher. My concentration was on special ed in university, and I got the pleasure of working one-on-one with children with Down syndrome. So it really broke my heart to find out that they're testing the chromosomes of the embryo and then considering them not valuable, not consistent with life.
Right. Or less valuable.
Not top choices. And I just think that the world's not a better place if you rid the world of Down syndrome people.
And it is happening because their numbers are declining.
Greatly. 90% are aborted.
Which is an absolute tragedy. And we're kind of downplaying this, but this is something that you in particular, given your background, this is something that you are incredibly, I will speak on your behalf. This is something that Melissa is incredibly passionate about, which is why you're becoming emotional.
I know. I can't stand it. Like, they're just such beautiful people. They are.
They really are. They're the best of us. And
it's like if people weren't corrupted, they would be people with Down syndrome.
Pure, correct. Yeah. It's amazing. It really is a tragedy that
and such a blessing to their families.
Yes. For all of us. I mean, we all know this if you've had interactions with these beautiful folks.
Yeah, so that was one thing that I saw in that conversation that just caught my attention. I think a lot of people would skip over that, like, obviously. But to me, I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, at least implant them and give them a chance, you know? So... But
it is up to every individual couple, parent to make that decision for themselves.
Right. So there is this movement of moral IVF. You only fertilize the amount of eggs that you are willing to implant. You do not do genetic testing on them. And so they're opting to extract less eggs. And actually, all of these clinics, now that they have all these millions of abandoned embryos, are saying, we have been taking too many eggs. We have been fertilizing too many eggs because the more the merrier was the way that it was before. We have a greater chance. And every cycle is expensive. So to go about it in a moral way for these women, it's more expensive. Because if you choose to only, if it were me personally, I'd probably say 2 eggs. I'll implant 2. Maybe I have twins, maybe I have 1, maybe I have none. I would not want to risk triplets. So I would probably say 2. But then if those 2 fail, which you have a really high chance of 2 failing, they're saying you need 12 over 40 to have 1 live birth. It's now very expensive because you have to pay for each round.
Right.
And then just the hormones that you have to take, and the egg extraction is very painful, and like all kinds of things that you have to go through.
New world. It's a very interesting time that we're living in.
Yeah. My question is this. If you decide you don't want to thaw, you don't want to donate, I'm going to give it to science because maybe it will help with vaccines, or maybe it will help with children that are going to be born with spina bifida or autism or other things like Down syndrome, to be able to do studies and prevent some of these maybe preventable diseases or things like that. But what if they take your embryo and they put it on ice, and maybe there's a moral code right now of we don't grow human beings in artificial wombs. I know artificial wombs are kind of a thing right now where they can take a premature child, they can put it into this artificial womb type thing, and then grow it to where the lungs are healthy and everything like that. And I think that's a neat idea. But then sometimes science goes too far. Like sometimes there's things that are started for good, like growing human skin.
Like
or
the internet or anything.
The internet.
Yeah.
Growing human organs. If you can grow hearts and lungs and kidneys and liver, and we have people and children that need heart transplants and there's not enough hearts, and you can grow them the perfect heart, could you say no to that as a parent if you had a child that needed a heart?
These are big discussions to be having. I mean, I guess I take issue with the concept and idea of developing a human being for spare parts.
Yeah.
Does that human being have a soul? Does that life have purpose in the same way?
I don't know. And are they human beings, or are these like weird cadaver bodies that don't have brains?
I guess I would just need more information because, again, it becomes an accountability issue. You don't know what it is that's being done and where do you draw those lines, like you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if it reaches the point of developing a human being whose life, again, bigger debate discussion, does it have value? Does it not? Does it not have value in the same way that, an organic human being does? Right. I mean,
But then it goes into the AI debate too. What about robots? If we're developing them to have empathy, I don't even know if that's possible. I don't know that that's
possible, yeah.
Maybe not in the same as a human source, like it would all be through programming and by learning.
That's not a soul. That's a program.
Yeah. At what point are we having the debate of the morality of their life or not life, but their existence?
You lose me with robots. You do. You lose me with the robots.
But how realistic do they become? What are they used for? And then do they have rights?
Robot rights?
Yeah.
You know what? As crazy as that sounds, crazy. I'm sure we will reach that point one day.
But that thing's smiling at us on the internet.
He is adorable.
I mean, I'm not talking about the baloney guy. I'm talking about the one where they put the face on it.
Oh, that one was terrifying. Not adorable.
Well, they hadn't
But of course they're going to make him adorable.
But they hadn't done the eyelashes, and they're going to, the skin was just over the metal. But like
they're going to want him to look cute because when they confront you with your own mortality and your own demise, you're going to want to question yourself. I can't shoot that thing in the face.
It can smile. You ever seen the movie Smile? It's just smiling at you.
Listen, I want to take a quick second and thank one of the sponsors of today's episode, Delete Me. You know all of those really irritating phishing phone calls and scammy emails that many of us receive? It's a good sign that your personal information has unfortunately been sold online, which makes you very susceptible to things like scammers and even worse, identity theft.
In an attempt to combat that, we signed up for Delete Me last summer, and they found literally hundreds of different websites that had our personal data and up to 40 data brokers that were selling our information. So their privacy experts took it from there and they put in requests to have all of our information removed. On our last report, they found only 5 listings, which obviously is a massive improvement to the 300 that they found on our first report. The cool thing is they will continue to scan the web, making sure that our private information doesn't pop up again. If you're anything like us, you're probably curious how your information ends up online in the first place. Well, it turns out there are data brokers out there scouring the web, collecting huge amounts of your personal identifiable information. They then package it up, license it, and sell it to other data brokers, anyone with an interest in your personal information, and even scammers.
So Melissa and I actually signed up for a family plan with Delete Me. That way, all of our family members are protected under one single plan. This is so important, especially for your elderly family members, since they're so oftentimes a target for these scammers.
To give Delete Me a try for yourself and take the first steps towards protecting your personal information online, just click the link below or go to joindeleteme.com/GSL and remember to use our code GSL to get 20% off. Thank you, Delete Me, for sponsoring today's episode. Now let's get back to our conversation. All right, well, enough with the IVF thing because it was something that we've been looking into. We were asked a question, we researched it. This is what we came to. I still have a lot of questions. I think everyone should ask questions before forming opinions and maybe go and listen to the IVF doctors. And there's a lot of stuff coming out about it.
It is very fascinating.
It's very fascinating. And it is something that honestly, I had never even thought about.
Yeah.
So anyway, moving on, what else has been swirling around the internet is this whole kill the creator movement.
You briefly touched upon a couple episodes ago now, you touched upon Chris Ava Tyson, who is a very close associate of MrBeast, who is kind of being put through the ringer right now because there are these expose videos that are being put out on YouTube, getting multiple millions of views. And MrBeast, for our audience, there's probably a lot of you out there who aren't very familiar with MrBeast. He is the biggest creator on the platform. He's got like 300 some odd million subscribers, and every video that he puts out like outperforms the Super Bowl, to give you an idea of just how
he's huge,
how big of a presence this guy Jimmy has on the platform. So
yeah, our kids were massive fans. And then this week Eli was concerned that I was subscribed.
Yeah, so in these expose videos, if you want to call them that, there are basically former employees who are coming out and pointing out that there has been a lot of nefarious activity that he, primarily as the head of his own brand and company, has been responsible for, with doctoring autograph merchandise, kind of running these scams to benefit himself.
Lotteries.
These illegal lotteries is how it was described, which doesn't really, I don't know. I guess I don't have a huge issue with a lot of that stuff. The more concerning part of it, however, was this Chris Ava Tyson, who again was probably his closest associate on the channel, was a married male with a young child who came out a year or so ago as a trans female.
It was probably, besides Caitlyn Jenner, it was probably the most public transformation.
Yeah, right. So he announces that, hey, I'm actually trans. I'm going to begin this transition. Of course, he was very widely celebrated for making that announcement and pursuing his own desires, which is fine. I've got my own personal hangups with the fact that you're a married man with a child who's deciding to make this decision for yourself. Regardless, it came to light that while still a male who was in his early 20s, he was using a online Discord server to communicate directly with like 13 and 14-year-olds, referencing a lot of sexually explicit concepts. He was just making a lot of really inappropriate remarks, seemingly grooming these kids.
He was acting like he was 13, and I think mentally they kind of all are. Like, they all act like kids. When we saw them in person, I met one of them, and I tried talking to him, and he was like, like he was like a little kid.
Yeah, and so we're not trying to pig pile onto any of this. Again, it's worth looking into if you are unfamiliar with it, because it seems to be far too prevalent in today's day and age. There's a lot of
shady stuff going
on when it comes to kids and grooming and all that. So.
I think it's very important to know who your kids and grandkids are idolizing, watching, and spending their time with. There's a lot of streamers that are really popular if your kids are into video games. MrBeast is just huge. There is not a child, unless they do not have any access to the internet, that does not know who MrBeast is.
And his videos are geared primarily towards children.
100%.
And it was also pointed out that there's a lot of manipulative tactics that are used in order to get kids to not only watch, but watch repeatedly, watch for an extended period of time, to subscribe, to become very invested in his channel, which ordinarily I wouldn't necessarily have an issue with. As Melissa pointed out, our kids were big fans of MrBeast's channel, and his videos are very exciting. They're very entertaining for sure. All that aside, though, I mean, I think when you look into what it is that was occurring, it's very, very troubling.
Yeah. So the outrage about the videos being fake, or the challenges being predetermined, or having stuff added in special effects, and it was basically just put in there for entertainment and watch time retention.
Right.
I think if you're surprised by that, then you're just not paying attention to the internet and YouTube. If you think that any of the challenge shows, or any of this like really hot hitting content, or personal challenges, or anything like that are 100% authentic, real, filmed in the way that they happen, it's just not true.
Which is why
it's
none of
like a
that stuff
television
really
show.
bothered me. When that came to
Right.
light, I was like, yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
obviously.
apply some discernment. And if you're unaware, I will tell you that there is a lot of content online, just it's kind of like reality TV, right? Where it's called reality TV, but there really isn't all that much that is real about it. A lot of the content that you see on YouTube is very highly produced, very scripted, very manipulated for a variety of reasons, not all of which are nefarious by any means, but it is something to be aware of. So that part of it didn't bother me. But digging into the background, this whole grooming that was happening online with Chris Ava Tyson, and then there's a second video that was more recently put out to where I guess at one point in time he had hired this registered sex offender.
That was the most, actually, that was the most disturbing part to me.
Agreed. He hired a registered sex offender out of the state of Delaware. He actually had a nickname of Delaware because he was restricted from
They say that's not why. They say it's
state.
because he was from there.
That was the explanation that was provided. I don't see why that would restrict you from entering the state.
It doesn't.
Regardless,
It doesn't.
his crimes were against. It was clarified that it was against a child between the age of 1 and 11. So I don't know the details. Needless to say, shouldn't be happening. And I'm not saying that people who have any kind of a criminal past or criminal history shouldn't be shown some grace. However, when you are running a channel that is targeted at children
and includes children in the challenges,
includes some minors in some of the challenges, some of the videos, it raises some very important concerns and questions.
Well, the explanation was that they did not believe that he was guilty. And so this is according to the brother-in-law of Delaware. So the brother-in-law of Delaware said that he was accused by a 16-year-old girl that when she was 11, which is why apparently 1 to 11 is like an age range.
Sure.
She claimed when she was 11 that he had assaulted her. And so he took a plea deal, basically admitting to it to avoid prison time, but that he wasn't actually guilty. He was just trying to avoid prison time. And he made the agreement that he would register as an RSO. So
my immediate reaction in response to that was, if you're innocent, you don't do that.
Right.
Who among us is going to be willing to just register as an SO?
Yeah.
Certainly not me. I would fight in battle and do everything within my power to make sure that, hey, if I'm innocent, I'm going to prove it to you, not just shrug my shoulders and say, I'll take the plea.
Yeah. So apparently he took the plea and is now registered. And then after the fact, he sat down with Jimmy Donaldson, who is MrBeast, and his mother, Sue, and explained his side of the story. They decided that they thought that he was okay, hired him as some kind of a manager back when the channel was kind of really taking off. And he was in a few videos. So in the videos, he wasn't feeling comfortable because he was on the registry with his photo and everything. So he's wearing a mask, like a wrestler mask, which is so creepy.
And the reason that's relevant is that it seems to prove that there was knowledge of his status as this
there's like admitted knowledge of his status.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, it makes total sense. Apply some common sense. It makes sense.
Yeah. That seems like a lack of common sense. So whether or not it just seems like a total lack of common sense. If you have a channel that is completely targeted at children, which it is, and you're selling candy bars and merch for kids, and you're on these discords with a bunch of minors, and you include children in the challenges, then you should not have an RSO working there, present in the videos, and managing the whole thing.
Also, there was a prior live stream where there was, what is it called? Lolly. So there's an artist out there, this is a horrible thing too.
Lolly is...
There are artists out there who come up with illustrations that deal in depictions of child... Can I even say it?
I don't even know. You're probably going to get in trouble on here.
Sexually explicit acts involving children.
Yes.
So there's illustrations on the wall. There's a live stream going. MrBeast is sitting in the background while Chris is the primary focus, the focal point in front of the camera. And there's a moment, a screen grab, where MrBeast is looking with what appears to be an expression of concern at this photograph on the wall. Again, this is his right-hand man.
Well, it's an apartment they shared, and it was art on their wall.
Yeah, regardless. It's very easy to make the argument that MrBeast had knowledge of all of this. And it's kind of taken on a life of its own. There's been this snowball effect to where now everyone's trying to make these cancellation efforts of MrBeast. It'll be interesting to see whether or not he is too big to fail on the platform, essentially. Yep. He has such a massive online presence. So it'll be interesting to see exactly where this goes. But the publicity and a lot of the outcry that's happening online now has been
Well, there's like
overwhelming.
There's so much that it's a little hard to say like that he didn't know what was going on the Discord server. People are like, well, he didn't actually say anything. Chris Ava Tyson was saying really inappropriate things to a 13-year-old girl who asked how he was basically doing with his lolly addiction. Why were you talking about a lolly addiction to a young girl?
Yeah.
Why would she know to even ask you that question? There was a little boy that he had been grooming and that he actually ended up meeting up with when he was 16. He said that nothing happened, but they drove out to like a remote area. So there's just a lot of weird stuff. You can't really claim ignorance when you are present on the Discord. So they released a bunch of it. He said something, someone had made a joke about Chris Tyson's manhood. And then MrBeast said like something like, I've seen it. It's actually huge. You're on a server where there's minors. You know there's minors on there. Like that's so inappropriate to say about a grown man when you are like, it just seems like stupidity.
Yeah, but all of this, even after the fact, I mean, it is concerning. Like I said, I don't want to downplay it at all, but it's such smut. It's such garbage at this point. And everyone's pig pie. I'm not trying to defend the guy whatsoever. I'm not trying to defend either one of them. Again, to claim that ignorance is completely insufficient and inexcusable, in my own personal opinion. I guess the bigger discussion that we had is because we've had exposure to these people. We don't know them directly. We've never worked with them.
Yeah.
But we've had indirect exposures to a lot of these people. It made me feel a little naive as a parent because our kids were fans of this channel and of MrBeast.
And everybody on the crew.
Everyone on the crew as well. Yeah. So we've had indirect contact with them. You know, Kaimani, if you go back a couple of years, we went to a YouTube conference where he had direct contact with MrBeast alone in an elevator. He signed his arm. We focused on that.
Super nice to him.
So excited. He had some items of merchandise, I believe, from you know his brand and all the stuff that they sell. And so I guess I just came away feeling like a little naive and a little deceived as a parent. Shame on me for entrusting people. You know, I have a very skeptical view of the world for the most part, especially given my background in law enforcement. And I just felt I didn't feel very proud of myself as a parent in that moment, just kind of seeing all of this happen. And then that led to a discussion in our household about the worshiping of celebrities or influencers, if you want to refer to them as such, on YouTube specifically, but across all of these social media platforms.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that it's so easy for you to see someone and watch them and then think you know everything about them.
And glorify them.
Yeah. I'm totally guilty of getting very excited to see people and meet people. But the reality is we don't really know people outside of our family and close-knit friends. And you have to be really careful what your kids are consuming and watching.
Subsequently, our kids are a little turned off with MrBeast and all things MrBeast right now. They did, and I'm proud of them for it. And again, I'm not trying to pig pile. I don't know. I've always had a problem. If you watch this podcast, you know I'm not a huge fan of social media. I get the irony of that is not lost on me as we sit here recording ourselves talking in a room by ourselves. But it's a weird and very messy place. And I think a lot of audience members, you folks out there who watch, who aren't actually actively posting yourselves to the internet, have a very warped, very skewed perception of the things that you are viewing. We view it very differently. We view it through a different lens as people who do it. And we know a lot of the personalities that are involved. And it's just kind of proven itself over time to be somewhat of a letdown. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah. Well, and now there's kind of this big movement, the kill the creator movement, where people are starting to see it for what it is, or they're starting to see the fakeness, or they're starting to see the different personalities that maybe pretend to be really nice and then aren't so nice, or that are scamming people. I mean, there was a big creator that was pretending to give away money for charities or raise money for charities and then wasn't actually giving away the money, or they were faking giveaways like you can win $10,000, but then they were never actually picking a winner.
That's something else that also struck me and I took very personally, right? Because we've made a lot of charitable efforts on our channels with our audience, and it's raised a lot of doubt amongst people out there as to the motivations for doing that.
Right.
For us, it has always been a very pure thing. We had an opportunity to help those who were in need. We collectively, audience members as well as ourselves, contributed to hopefully make an improvement, enhance the lives of these people who are in need. But now with situations like this, because MrBeast is also, he has a separate charity channel, philanthropy channel, and it's been presented as a means of offsetting all of the nefarious activities that have taken place in his personal life and the personal lives of those that he chooses to surround himself with.
Well, that's how a lot of people see it. A lot of people see it that way, and a lot of employees or
It's about perception.
have said that, well, if I have this charity over here, then you can't say
I'm a bad person.
I'm a bad person.
Right.
Or all tax breaks or whatever. But at the same time, I will flip the coin on that. Beast Philanthropy has done some incredible things. And even, I don't know if he does it out of the goodness of his heart or if he does it for perception, or I don't know. I'm not going to pretend to know the heart and mind of somebody.
Regardless.
But
what has been done has been amazing.
Like thousands of people helped by that.
Yeah.
And so he gets a lot of criticism. He went and bought shoes for a bunch of kids in Africa because they're not allowed to attend school if they don't have these black shoes.
Mm-hmm.
And then like also tennis shoes for them to play in. And he went and donated them, and he got ripped apart on the internet because people were saying, well, so now he's white savior and he's only focusing on these black kids for attention and all of that. But at the same time, hundreds of kids got to now attend school. So if you went and asked those kids individually if they felt jaded by this, I don't think they would. And like 100 people got their sight, 100 people got their hearing. He went and drilled wells where people were dying of malaria and they had no running water.
Yep.
So if you go and ask the people in that village if they felt taken advantage of by MrBeast, I think that they would be like, no, this is great.
Yeah, and I think it's fair to look at the perception, the optic aspect of it, right? Of like, hey, look, I'm just a good person doing good things. Cast all that aside. I think it's completely reasonable to be like, hey, what you're doing over here is that's not okay. Not only is it not okay, it's potentially criminal. It is, it's evil. It's wrongdoing. It is what it is. Conversely, all of the people who are benefiting from all of his philanthropy on this, say what you want about it. I think that is a great thing. And I personally, I've said this on the podcast. I've said it over on Good Simple Living that I think, and I really wish that there were more people on the platform who took advantage of the elevated platform and exposure that they do have to do more good in the world. I really do, because I feel like there's just not enough of it happening. And all of us who have done, had any level of success on the platform have benefited tremendously. And it's such a powerful thing to unite people, bring them together for the good of those who are in a lesser position, who are in need.
Yeah, a lot of people want to do good, but they don't know how to do it at a large scale, or they're not able to do it at a large scale.
And now, from now on, anytime it happens, especially with this annual charity that we do, it's always going to raise questions. And that's so frustrating for me personally. Yeah, we've already gotten that. We've already gotten people who said that the money that we've managed to raise through our channel, through our very gracious, generous audience, wasn't being passed along to these kids that we were showing as being the beneficiaries, and that really gross, really ugly things that were absolutely infuriating, if I'm being totally honest.
Because it made us not want to do it at all, because we were being accused of fraud, essentially.
It sucked the joy out of doing something that was really great.
Yeah. So for people that don't know, we do an annual pediatric cancer fundraiser. We raise money for the program that is local here for the Spokane, Washington area. They serve Montana, Eastern Washington, North Idaho. And so they serve a lot of kids and a lot of families, and they don't have a lot of support because they're a private organization. So we decided to use our channel and our audience to rally behind them. And so we would raise money, and then we would adopt as many families as we could, pediatric cancer families, take care of their Christmases, and then fill their toy closet. So when the kids go to annual appointments and things like that. Well, everything was fine the first 3 years. And then last year, when different creators started being basically exposed, MrBeast was not one of them. He doesn't, as far as I know, he doesn't do any fake charity. His charity is legitimate. But there was another very top creator that got exposed for doing fake charity, pretending to do charity, and then not actually following through. When that happened, we started getting accusations that the money we were raising, we were keeping. And that's how we built our house. Was off of that, and that the toys that were shipped to us that were supposed to go to the families and to the toy closet, we were selling on Amazon for money, or selling on eBay. And I'm like, how do you think we're going to sell 50 Barbie dolls on eBay? Like, that we were running like an eBay shop out of our... Anyway, this got back to us, and I was so like beaten down by it, because it was in the middle of the toy drive, and the toy drive is, we do it ourselves. So it's, 4, 5, 6 hours a day for a month that we work on this. And I just like started crying. Like, why are we doing this? And I had to remind myself, we're doing it for the kids and we're doing it for our community. But it made me not want to do it anymore because those are really disgusting accusations. And we had no way of defending ourselves. I mean, we make videos that show us literally packing everything up and delivering it. And then the clinic was like, please don't stop doing it. We can make statements, public statements and everything. I'm like, that's just going to make it worse if they start me
it's very unfortunate. And I mean, you can't allow for it to deprive, the kids of, it's very frustrating when all this stuff happens. And now with all of this MrBeast drama happening, it just feels like the tide is turning, I guess, with a lot of these really big, very prevalent online characters is what I'll call them, because it's really what they are. I said on one of the first podcast episodes that we did is that a big part of my frustration with social media and YouTube in particular is that it's all just a portrayal for the most part. And it's not always the case. I mean, everybody tries to be their authentic self for the most part, but at the same time, you are very cognizant of the fact that there are cameras around, you're recording yourself. Everyone wants to depict themselves in a very favorable light, right? Completely understandable. I'm not trying to point the finger at anybody and say that you're doing anything wrong, but this kill the creator movement that is happening, I think will have long-standing consequences. And I think that a lot of
some of it's
veil, some of it is good. It raises the level of accountability, which I think is very good. And it helps people to wise up to what it is that they're viewing. Because
the fact that
truth be told, a lot of people are not aware of it.
Yeah. And the fact that people were doing fake charities and everything is totally disgusting. And so I'm glad that the accountability is raised. But there really is only so much that you can do as far as accountability goes. So it also scares people from wanting to go out there and do charitable things if they're going to be accused of fraud and stuff.
Yeah, it shouldn't be the case. Why are we discouraging,
Well, I don't think that people are meaning to discourage. I mean, I actually don't know where that whole story, I think it was just one person. I kind of know who I think it probably was that started the rumor, and then it spread. I mean, that spread like wildfire because that was delicious. Like that was like, oh, what? That's fake. And then, I mean, it got all the way back to like one of our carriers that was bringing us packages that actually brought it to our attention. And they were not the only person that brought it to our attention.
Yeah.
I think I got like 3 or 4 phone calls that week. Like, hey, just so you know, this is swirling around. And we were like, what?
All right. So all very interesting. We're going to start winding this down. I don't want to go long on this here. So we've got human skin on robots. We have the very important...
What a week it's been.
The very important, very fascinating IVF debate and this kill the creator movement, which has... I don't know. It's just been a point of discussion for us, given what it is.
Yeah, I think that we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg on that. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff coming out, a lot of change.
And this is still ongoing. The person that's responsible for putting all this stuff out about MrBeast specifically is there's like lawsuits that are being threatened. People are suing each other back and forth, and this is the ugly behind the curtain side of YouTube that viewers really oftentimes aren't very aware of. So interesting discussion. You want to wind it down on a happier note, Mama? What do you have for us?
Well, geez.
No pressure.
I don't know. I mean, this week we were just kind of staying away from the whole like political end of things and just like what else is going on in the news. And then I feel like the news is never good news. They just call it the bad news.
We're going to try to keep things happier for you guys next week here on the podcast side of things. We do have a little bit of a surprise for you.
Yeah, we do.
You will see that if you tune in next Wednesday, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Good Simple Living video will be out on Saturday. We're just going to keep doing our thing there, keeping it as positive as we possibly can. And that's about it. Anything else from you?
Nope, that'll do it.
All right. Love and appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time. Don't forget to subscribe, like, comment. We appreciate it. We'll see you next week.